Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Depot Dive. I'm Ross McCorkle, your host, and above me here on the screen, Joe Clark, my co-host as always, and we are here talking about a Steelers victory today. We're going to wrap up our thoughts on the Week 1 game. We're going to talk about the injury report and kind of some stuff to look forward to in Week 2 against the Denver Broncos, and we're going to finish off our season predictions because we only got about half of them done last time. It took a little longer than expected, so we're going to wrap up everything from the bye week on. Before we dive in, Joe, how are you doing today?
Good, good. It's always more fun writing the week after a win. Obviously, Wilson and Fields giving us a lot to talk about, especially new additions on the injury report today too. A lot of stuff to dive into. So been a busy week, but always good to be 1-0.
No doubt. And, going back to our season predictions, we both had them losing in that Week 1. And so, it'll be interesting to see if our projections here over the second half of the season have any effect or any change due to that victory. And, mine are kind of set in stone because I wrote it in post form last week. So, but Joe, no one will know if you change your answers due to having a little more information now. But we'll dive into just kind of recapping the Week 1 victory. And obviously, Justin Fields started the game. Russell Wilson, he went through kind of I guess you could call it a workout, but he essentially was standing like a statue, throwing the football with his headphones on before the game. And, all the broadcasts were saying, oh, the trainer isn't even out there. There's no way he's going to go. And sure enough, they named Justin Fields the starter. Fields ultimately got the Steelers a win, and this isn't something that can really be taken lightly. If you look at Justin Fields' career, he's started 38 games and he's only won 10 of them. Now he's started 39 and he's won 11. So moving in the right direction there for Fields. But Joe, wherever you want to start, just with your Week 1 thoughts.
Yeah, I think what we saw was the game plan that I think we've expected out of the Steelers really the last two seasons. They ran the ball well. They didn't turn the ball over, and they turned the other team over with strong defensive effort. So we kind of expected that last year to start the year for the Steelers, and the run game never really got off the ground in the early portion of the season. But even though the numbers aren't all that gaudy, I think he only averaged 3.5 yards per carry. Najee Harris ran the ball well. Justin Fields added, a little ability to rush, and he ran the ball. I think he had something like 54 yards, maybe a little bit less. 54, 45, something like that. And the Steelers did what they had to do to win the game. TJ Watt was a man among boys out there, so that was obviously huge. And it was good to see Dante Jackson, Deshaun Elliott both make a play on their Steelers debut, both made interceptions. Dante Jackson has really locked down the whole game. And Fields did what he had to do. He missed some throws. He wasn't, spectacular, but he moved the ball down the field, and they set up Chris Boswell, who had one of the better kicker games ever, really. It's 6 field goals, 3 from 50 plus. He could have had more. He could have had 7 field goals if they kicked one. They went for it on fourth down, which was a decision that I think we'll probably end up talking about at some point, but definitely an interesting one there. But all things considered, you got to like what you saw. They stuck to the script and won the game, and the win's a win. So all around, pretty overall solid showing out of the Steelers.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that so we don't forget the decision to go for it on fourth. Mike Tomlin, he's saying, a lot of times football teams don't deserve to win if you can't, convert on 4th and 1 or 4th and inches even, I think it was on that play. And so the Steelers went for it. They ultimately got Troy Polamalu'd by, who was it, Landman. And yeah, he jumped over the line and just kind of shut the play down. And, sometimes other guys are going to make plays. It's not the kind of thing that you can really prepare for, a guy Polamaluing over the line. It happened. And, it was kind of unfortunate because the Steelers were up 15-10 at the time, kicking a field goal would have made it obviously 18-10, which no matter what, even if they score and go for two, you're talking about a tied game. And so there's a level of security in having an 8-point lead. I believe looks like there was 8 minutes and 5 seconds left in the fourth quarter at that decision. And so, Joe, do you like this? It's obviously in hindsight easy to say, you don't like the decision. But where are you at on that decision? Are you? I know a lot of people are pretty upset with it overall.
Generally, I'm in favor of going for it in those fourth and short situations. You get the first down there, you score a touchdown. Now it's a 2-score game. You basically put the game away without that much time left. And I mean, the offensive line had done pretty well throughout the game. So, like Mike Tomlin said, you want to trust your bigs up front. So, all in all, I don't really have too much of an issue with it. But given the situation, I mean, I wouldn't have been upset if they took the three there. You go up 8, like you said, you have that security. And with the way the defense was playing, them getting a touchdown and a 2-point conversion, who knows? The odds of that probably weren't all that high in that moment. So you could have been fine either way, but generally I tend towards being more aggressive. I like aggressiveness in those spots, and so I like to see them line up and go for it. I mean, I think the third down play call was, and Arthur Smith said today that Justin Fields put the ball not in the spot he was supposed to. If it was more inside, Van Jefferson could have gotten the first down or even more. So that kind of the failed third down play call led to that, and I think that's something that's a little bit overlooked in that. But when it comes to the fourth down decision, I'm not gonna say it was a bad decision because I like the idea of being aggressive and kind of trying to put the game away in that moment. So I had no issue with what Mike Tomlin did. I liked his answer after the game that sometimes if you don't get 4th and 1, maybe sometimes you deserve to lose, and having trust and faith in your offensive line, which had done a solid job all game. So one thing I would say is maybe I don't love the play call. I mean, I think everybody in the stadium, everybody watching on TV knew that the ball was going to be ran up the middle. So maybe a little bit of diversity in play calling there would have been better. But as far as the decision itself, it's something that I would say I was probably more or less in favor of.
Yeah, and I think Arthur Smith also talked about, they may had some other plays there, but in that kind of situation, you don't want to be, throwing, or you don't want to be going for the kill shot always, because that's how you lose games, I think was his direct quote. And so, yeah, I think overall, I mean, if I was calling the game, which obviously I'm not, very far from that, but if I was calling the game, I probably would have kicked the field goal just because, you trust that defense above all else. But I do understand they want their personality and they want to be known as a team that rolls people, as Mike Tomlin said after the 2024 NFL draft. And so I'm okay with them, attempting that. And I think we'll probably see the benefits of those decisions down the line. That'll make them look, better. Obviously, it's easy to look at it in hindsight and be like, oh, that was a terrible decision. I think at the time, a lot of people felt that, including myself, but I do understand it in the end. But Arthur Smith today also talked about avoiding the middle of the field. He talked about, what was his movie reference? Jason Bourne, Bourne Identity stuff. He said, our Jason Bourne, meaning TJ Watt, wrecked the game, and theirs didn't, meaning Jesse Bates. And he basically said that it wasn't Justin Fields just not seeing or not, delivering the ball to the middle of the field. It was a concerted effort on the Steelers' part to avoid that area in an effort to stay away from guys like Justin Simmons and Jesse Bates, who are two of the best safeties in the league. And so I think that kind of, I know in the immediate aftermath of the game, you see those passing charts, and it looks like Justin Fields, has Kenny Pickett-itis and can't go to the middle of the field at all. But now hearing from Arthur Smith that it was more of a game plan thing, and that, from their mouths, Fields executed the game plan pretty well. And so, I thought that was interesting. And certainly if Fields starts this weekend, that leaves a lot of possibilities for things that they can do, because the Broncos don't have a Jesse Bates or a Justin Simmons back there at safety. They do have some other good players, but I think they'll probably go to the middle of the field more. Joe, any more thoughts on Justin Fields' Steelers debut?
Yeah, no, I think he just executed how to do well. And I think another layer of that middle of the field things in the past, I mean, Justin Fields has had some issues with, turnovers, interceptions and fumbles. I mean, Jesse Bates forced, Arthur Smith brought it up. He had almost had the forced fumble in week 1 last year, and he had 2 interceptions. So it was a real conscious effort to get away from him. And it was a good plan. It worked out, and Fields didn't turn the ball over, which I think was a lot. I mean, at least for me, and I would assume for a lot of people, one of the biggest issues if Fields were to start, he's more turnover prone than Russell Wilson. So doing that kind of kept him safe, and he was able to make plays. So all in all, pretty happy with it. I mean, followed the game plan and did what he had to do. Obviously, not scoring a touchdown, isn't great, but the Steelers, I mean, they trusted Chris Boswell. I mean, their first drive was a 3rd and 6, and they ran to Cordero Patterson up the middle to give Boswell a better chance at a field goal. So that was what they were looking to do, and their defense held steady, and they're able to win the game. So I'm pretty happy with what Fields did, and I'm excited to see what he can do against Denver. Maybe more time to prepare, and more of an expanded playbook at his arsenal. Could be a good performance out of him. So I'm excited to see how he keeps it up.
Yeah, I think the Broncos kind of have an incomplete study in terms of tape review because it's probably going to look a lot different. I mean, there's some concepts and stuff that they can obviously glean, but in terms of attacking the middle of the field, it's kind of anybody's guess what the Steelers are going to do in that regard. I think the receivers not named George Pickens combined for 2 catches for 8 yards, I believe, which is obviously not ideal, but when you consider what the game plan was, it kind of worked out okay. A couple of those deep shots to George Pickens. He would have went over 100 yards if not for the questionable pass interference call on him. I think he would have been at like 120 something or I can't remember the exact number, but that was 33 or 34 yards wiped out by the pass interference. So there's a lot to like about Justin Fields' debut. I think the deep shots were good, and obviously George Pickens, he's going to catch almost anything that comes his way. That one catch that the one non-completion to Pickens was almost the craziest catch that I've ever seen, and he almost had it. Like, it was on his one hand. It would have been a early candidate for catch of the year had he made it, but he did not. Obviously, Zach Frazier was a big talking point this week. He had, I can't remember a better rookie debut in recent Steelers memory. I'm trying to think of somebody who would even be close, honestly. I mean, what did Devin Bush actually had a decent debut, didn't he? He had
that's the name. That's the name I was going to go to. I think Devin Bush week 1 kind of impressed.
Yeah. So hopefully those are unrelated. Nobody get any. That's a bad association there. But Zach Frazier was. I counted 6 or 7 true pancake blocks where he's just planting dudes on their butt. And then there was 3 or 4 other hits where he hit somebody and they ended up on a knee or kind of sort of falling over. I mean, this dude was a wrecking ball out there. His grip strength, once he latches onto you, you are not going anywhere, and that kind of fuels his whole game. He latches onto you, and then he drives his feet, and you're done. Very, very impressive by Frazier. I had a film room up on him earlier in the week, so if you guys haven't seen that, the tape is very, very fun. Brian Baldinger actually said Mike Webster would be proud of that debut, and so that's very high praise for Frazier. The defensive line, Joe, do you want to talk about the defensive line a little bit here?
Yeah, no, I mean, it was everything you kind of expected to see and then some. I mean, Cameron Heyward, I think he played 35 or some odd snaps and looked like his old self. He was in the backfield with Mon Adams and I think Adams got credit for the full sack there. Just complete jailbreak, broke through the offensive line. That was a great play. Bijan Robinson had some success, but not a lot of it was, up the middle between the tackles. It was, a really just what you want to see out of that unit. I mean, Adams stepping up, he's on a full-time guy, rotational guy. Cameron Heyward looked great. And then your edge rushers, TJ Watt was just spectacular. He's not better if it weren't for, he would have had 2 strip sacks and one was taken away by hands to the face, I think, on Dante Jackson. The other was taken away by offsides penalty where he wasn't offsides and the official said after the game that he messed it up, but he still had the sack. He had a fumble recovery on a broken play that was kind of caused by the Pittsburgh fans. Kirk Cousins put Ross Dwelley in motion too late. Snap came and hit Dwelley off the side, and Watt broke through and dove on it. It was a heck of a play. And I mean, just having TJ Watt out there just makes such a huge difference. I mean, Alex Highsmith too even had a pass breakup. He's not a guy you can really forget about out there. And I think this week with a rookie quarterback, this is a group that's really going to feast. I mean, and you wrote it up today. PFF had them as the number 1, D-line edge rusher group in the entire NFL. And I mean, that's pretty darn impressive given some of these defensive lines across the league. So it was a great effort, really great performance. I mean, it feel like we're going to see a lot of the same of that this season. It's a group that's, pretty motivated. Cameron Heyward only has 1 playoff win he's actually played in during his Steelers tenure. TJ Watt doesn't have any. So it's a group that really wants to win and really wants to show out. And we saw it week 1, and I think we're going to see it a lot the rest of the season.
Yeah, Patrick Queen today said it was kind of boring to play inside linebacker on Sunday. And that's because, as he said, he only had 4 opportunities to even make a tackle. Traditionally, in a 3-4 defense, you're talking about a defensive line freeing up the inside linebackers to make the plays. But if the defensive line is so good that there's no plays to make, that's pretty much what happened. on Sunday. And so Patrick Queen had a pretty quiet game, 2 tackles. I think he had 2 more missed tackles, so he needs to clean that up. Not anything super concerning. We'll talk about him a little bit later with the injury report, but the PFF had them as the top defensive line, and it wasn't particularly close. The next best was the Lions, and they were quite a bit lower than the Steelers in terms of the overall grade. I think Cameron Heyward was the second highest graded interior defensive lineman. TJ Watt was, I believe, the top outside linebacker. I can't imagine anyone being higher than his 95.6 or whatever grade that he had. And so, yes, very, very impressive. And a pair of Steelers newcomers, Dante Jackson and Deshaun Elliott, making interceptions. Both of those interceptions were pretty much a direct result of Larry Ogunjobi. So once again, the defensive line making a huge impact. Even on the plays where, your average fan or average onlooker might assume, okay, that was a great play by, the secondary. A lot of those were caused by the pressure up front. And so I think, it's going to be very exciting to watch this group. And for a group that had a lot of questions this offseason about them, with Cam Hayward's health and Larry Ogunjobi not living up to his contract, and where's the depth? Where's, is DeMarvin Leal any good? These kinds of things. I think they answered a ton of those questions in week 1, and so that is very exciting for the team. We're going to move on to the second topic and run through the injury report real quick. Joe, you want to take that away?
Yeah, so for Pittsburgh today, the biggest news was that Patrick Queen popped up with a DNP due to a groin injury. He practiced in full yesterday, wasn't on the report. So something to monitor, maybe a little bit concerning, but he was interviewed before practice today. Didn't really seem to indicate that anything was wrong. And I mean, we saw Darnell Washington DNP Thursday last week, and he was good to go. So I wouldn't put too much stock in Queen not going today, but something to monitor obviously is a full DNP. The biggest thing to me, I think, was Larry Ogunjobi went from limited yesterday to full today with a knee. I mean, both Terrell Austin and Mike Tomlin have credited him being healthy this offseason to, as you said, he was a key part of those 2 interceptions, how he played week 1, how he's been this season. So hopefully he can stay healthy. Cam Heyward got a rest day. Isaac Seumalo remained out with a pectoral injury. Dan Moore Jr. out again, or Dan Moore Jr. went full after it was out yesterday with an ankle, which is a good sign for the Steelers. If he's full today, probably be able to go on Sunday. Darius Rush remained limited with a concussion. Russell Wilson obviously limited again with a calf. He doesn't seem likely to play on Sunday. And then Roman Wilson logged his first full padded practice first full practice since the first day of pads with the Steelers. So good to see Roman Wilson get back. He could play a role on Sunday, provided he's full go tomorrow. So all things considered, more or less of what you'd expect. Good to see more back in full, but Queen DNP, something to monitor. And Ogunjobi and Wilson back full too is a positive sign after both were limited yesterday.
Yeah, Roman Wilson, I thought was kind of interesting on Wednesday's practice interviews. He was asked pretty directly. I mean, he's saying he's feeling good and his workload's going to increase. So the full practice was not a surprise. But he was asked pretty directly by somebody, are you running with the first team already? And he was kind of hesitated a little bit, and then he said, I don't think I'm supposed to answer that. And so, I don't know, maybe the tinfoil hat's on a little too much for me, but that kind of tells me that maybe he was, and maybe he's going to get involved sooner rather than later. I know a lot of people, including myself, have kind of leaned towards, this is going to be a week 4, 5, etc. kind of thing for Roman Wilson, just because he missed basically all of camp, other than the first 4 non-padded practices, and he missed all the preseason, and so it's hard for these rookies to jump back on the moving train. But Mike Tomlin often talks about how receivers are some of the most NFL-ready people due to, the emergence of 7-on-7 and all of these kinds of things, and this is a guy who has the mentality of blocking and all of this kind of stuff, and he's been mentally engaged, so hopefully he will be able to get involved soon. Like I said, only 2 catches for 8 yards for everybody not named George Pickens in the receiver room. And I think for all of those reasons, I do think Roman Wilson, maybe not this week, that might be obviously a little too soon, but if I could see him, getting 15 snaps or so in week 3 against the Los Angeles Chargers, I wouldn't say that that's off the table at this point. And then I did want to talk about Denver's injury report as well, very briefly. They had two starting offensive linemen on their injury report. Both were elevated to limited today, and they didn't practice at all yesterday, right?
Yeah, no.
That was who? Garrett Bowles and
Garrett Bowles in their center, Luke Wattenberg.
yeah, and so you're talking. I mean, we just had a big discussion about the Steelers' defensive line, and so it sounds like these guys might be able to play because they're limited. They're moving in the right direction, but if they're not 100%, yikes, that is going to be tough. And the Atlanta Falcons offensive line had a preseason ranking of number 6 by Pro Football Focus. The Broncos were at number 15, and so you're talking about a group that is potentially a little less talented than the one they just faced and potentially a little more banged up than the one they just faced. So that could be a very interesting kind of X factor for this game. I think that wraps up all of the injury stuff. I mean, Russell Wilson not playing. I don't know if that's set in stone yet. It seemed like he progressed a little bit today, but when he talked to the media, he did for the first time kind of said, that calf injury was a pretty strong, I forget, he said pretty strong, pretty good injury. And he was pretty disappointed when it happened, obviously pushing that sled back on July 24th, the day before training camp began. 6 weeks later, re-aggravating that injury. And so I think, I don't know, it sounds like it wasn't a full re-aggravation or full re-injury, but it was a little tight, and so they wanted to play it safe. I think a lot of people expected him to maybe push to play because it's the Broncos and they're paying him, 30, however many millions to not play for them this year. But it sounds like he's kind of locked in and on the same page with the decision makers of the Steelers. He kind of said, yeah, we're playing it smart, or at least he's saying the right things, which, is kind of Russell Wilson's MO. I don't think there's anything. Ray Fittipaldo today said that he thinks Troy Fautanu, speaking of Dan Moore Jr. on the injury report, him going back to full is a potentially bad sign for Broderick Jones because Ray Fittipaldo believes Fautanu, who has also been injured since week 2 of the preseason, could be the right tackle, starting right tackle no matter what this week. So that meaning if Dan Moore Jr. is good to go, it would be Fautanu at right tackle and Broderick Jones back to the bench. And I haven't posted this yet, but I am working on a Broderick Jones film room that'll probably go up in the morning. And yeah, I think that is probably the right call. Now, my only hesitation is Fautanu also struggled in his lone preseason. Sorry, that was preseason week 1, not week 2 that he got injured, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So that was a misspeak on my part, but yeah, that first preseason game, he allowed a sack, and he was pretty rough overall. So I think he actually allowed a pair of sacks in that game. And so, I don't know. How do you feel about the potential of Broderick Jones going back to the bench?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. It doesn't surprise me given the way Dan Moore Jr. played last week if they really do want to get Fautanu in there. And I mean, in preseason, I think it was Jerry Dulac reported that he was one of their top 2 offensive linemen with him and Isaac Seumalo. So the team obviously thinks very highly of him, but long term, it has to make you worry a little bit about Broderick Jones. I think when they drafted Fautanu, the thought was that Jones and Jones would be their bookend tackles of the future. Now he's kind of stepping in to replace Jones, which honestly, given the way Jones has played, is best for the team right now. But worrying about his long-term development, does it stunt his development going back to the bench now, not getting regular reps? And also be taken into consideration. But I mean, everything the Steelers have done indicates that they want to win now. And I think starting Moore is, which is a crazy thing to say. I don't think anybody said this months ago, but starting Moore is probably the best move for them. He's looked really solid, just stout. He was one of the highest graded pass blocking offensive tackles by PFF this week. And, the tape matches that. He was just steady. He was a solid offensive lineman. So if they view Fautanu as better than Jones, then it makes sense. It's just surprising, I guess, given that we didn't expect Jones to be relegated kind of, especially this quickly into the season. And the team talked about wanting to play him at left tackle and keep him there long term. So I think it makes the most sense for the Steelers right now. But I do worry long term about, what is Broderick Jones going to be? What is he going to become? Obviously, Dan Moore Jr. is a free agent after the season. The team can always turn back to Jones, but benching a guy midway or early into his second season, really midway through his career, he only started 9-10 games last season. So it's something that could definitely stunt his development. So you have to think about that. But for the Steelers to be the best team they can right now, if they think Fautanu is an upgrade, then yeah, I mean, go for it.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough pill to swallow if you're Broderick Jones. If that ends up happening, a rookie who's literally only played like 20 something snaps in one preseason game at the NFL level, jumping you on in the pecking order of things. And I think Broderick Jones said earlier in the offseason that he's okay with being on the right, he's okay with being on the left as long as he's starting. So he might that might be a little tough for him, but I think it's important to keep perspective. He's only 23 years old. He just turned 23 in May, and so this is still one of the youngest players on the team. Fautanu is how old is Troy Fautanu? I think they are the same age, but I want to say Fautanu was born in October. Okay, so he's only what is that? 5 months? Yeah, he's only 5 months younger than Broderick Jones. And so, these are two very young players. There's still a lot of time for Broderick Jones to turn things around, but a lot of the issues from the preseason that I broke down in that film room are going to be in this film room that I post tomorrow. He's not using his hands correctly. He's not placing them correctly or timing his punches correctly. He's just not playing aggressive enough. And, he has the footwork. He's very athletic. It's just he needs to get the physicality and the hand use of hands down. It's really limiting his effectiveness right now. But we will move on to our end of season predictions here. We did the first 8 last week, and this week we will finish it out with the back half of the schedule. Obviously, this is the more difficult part of the schedule. We're going to try to fly through these here. Washington Commanders, I had the Steelers winning 20-14. The Commanders, Jaden Daniels actually looked pretty good. I think he got Offensive Rookie of the Week this week by the NFL, and so maybe by the time the Steelers play him, he's maybe looking pretty good. But the Steelers have ample preparation with these mobile quarterbacks. But yeah, I have the Steelers winning this one 20-14 before they go into the gauntlet.
Yeah, I'd give the Steelers a win here. Jaden Daniels uses legs well, but Dan Quinn said that's not the plan. They want him to throw more. Well, if the Steelers get a rookie quarterback who's going to throw more with a Commander's offensive line that is not very good, I think the Steelers can win this one. 2014 sounds good to me. Let's go 28-14. Let's give the offense a little firepower in week 10.
Yeah, and Bobby Wagner reuniting with Dan Quinn. That's an interesting combination there from their days in Seattle. Very, very successful. Obviously, Wagner's much older. We will just talk about each of the divisions as a whole. So I have the Steelers sweeping the Ravens, and we won't talk about the scores in this scenario, but I have the Steelers sweeping the Baltimore Ravens. That's happened in 3 of the last 4 years. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens looked okay against the Chiefs. I mean, it's the Chiefs, and they went down to the last play, so you got to give them their props there. But I think that offensive line was pretty shaky, and that has been my largest concern for the Ravens this year. I think they lost something ridiculous like 50-something total starts or 40-something total starts along the offensive line this offseason. And so having to replace those, I think Roger Rosengarten got a very early welcome to the NFL moment on his very first snap. He got beat badly. And so, yeah, that offensive line might hold them back a little bit. And the Steelers have always had the Ravens number. So I have a sweep in that series. Joe, what are you thinking for that divisional matchup?
I actually have a soup against the Ravens too. I mean, the offensive line concerns you pointed out. Their coaching staff had a ton of turnover this offseason. And yeah, I mean, the offense looked decent against Kansas City. I mean, and Isaiah Likely was, an inch, half a foot away from, tying that game. They would have gone for 2. They could have won that game. But I don't know. I mean, Lamar Jackson's historically struggled against the Steelers. It's a game that I think the Steelers can just kind of dominate defensively, not really let him do that much, or both these games. So I do have a sweep against the Ravens, just given how good the Steelers have been against them recently. I mean, if the streak's got to end at some point, I mean, they're 7-1 or something against them in the last 8, but something crazy like that. But I think this year the Steelers defense is going to have the firepower to go 2-0 against Baltimore.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that we finally get to see 2 Lamar Jackson games. I feel like that almost never happens. There's always either an injury or they're resting players the last week of the season. And so hopefully we get to see Lamar twice because that will be fun to watch. The Cleveland Browns, I have them splitting the series with the Browns. Although, yikes with Deshaun Watson with the recent stuff, and obviously he didn't look good at all in week 1. Their offense looked terrible. They got absolutely manhandled by the Dallas Cowboys. That Cowboys team is good, so you gotta take that into consideration. But Watson, is he even going to be playing at this point? I think probably he will, because the NFL takes a while to conclude these kinds of investigations usually. But yeah, it's a little tumultuous over there. I have them splitting the series. If I had more information like I do now, I maybe would have had the Steelers taken both of them. But what do you think?
Yeah, this is one where after week one, I thought about changing my mind, but ultimately, I'll go 1-1. That's what I thought preseason. Watson looked really bad, but he looked really bad early in the season last year. Then before his injury, he started to round into form. Obviously, now he's got more allegations surrounding him that could affect his mindset and his mental and whatnot. And Browns kind of look like a mess. And the Watson allegations, they're a real dumpster fire out of week one, which kind of funny. Um, but yeah, I still think, I mean, the Browns defense is still really talented. It's a stout group, and I thought preseason 1-1, and I'm going to stick with it. I'm not going to let week one change my opinion. We still got a lot of football left to be played until they meet up in week 12.
Yeah, I agree there. The Browns, that one of those games is going to end up being like 7-6 or something stupid. They obviously still have a good defense. Cowboys made it maybe not look that way, but they do still have a good defense, and I don't think either offense is maybe going to be that great. So I think there could be a bit of a slogfest in one of those. All right, Week 15, Philadelphia Eagles. I have the Eagles winning. I have severe PTSD with Eagles-Steelers games. I went to Carson Wentz's rookie season game. I think it was 34-3 or something of that nature. I've been to a couple of those. I think they are literally two of the three worst losses in Steelers history. I've been to two of them. So I think I've been disallowed from Steelers games from this point forward. But yes, I have the Eagles winning this one 27-13. They look pretty good in week 1.
Yeah, I would go with the Eagles in this one too. I mean, I think the best Eagles Steelers game that I can remember is the Chase Claypool game. That was pretty fun, especially watching with my good buddy who was an Eagles fan. Is Chase Claypool scored 4 touchdowns against them, but this Eagles team's got a lot of talent. Saquon Barkley looked great in his Eagles debut. Jalen Hurts always solid at quarterback, and making a road matchup not going to be easy. Obviously, Philly fans are crazy, so I would take the Eagles in this one.
And we already talked about the Ravens there. I skipped over the Bengals here. The Bengals, they also, I mean, you talk about getting beat by the New England Patriots. I mean, the Steelers obviously lost to the Patriots last year, so they maybe don't have a lot of ground to stand on here. But yeah, I don't know. Are the Patriots for real, or were the Bengals just had an off day? I know they had one near touchdown that was punched out at the goal line for a fumble, and so that kind of thing can obviously swing a game massively. A 7-point, a pretty large point swing in that case. So I do have them splitting the series with the Bengals. I think Joe Burrow will at least light them up one time. It's been a while since that's happened, but it is kind of due.
This is one where I switched after week one. I originally had the Bengals sweeping the Steelers, given the Steelers 3-3 in the division. But after week one, I mean, I know it's early, but the Bengals offense just kind of like disjointed. Obviously, they traded Joe Mixon away, so losing him that hurts. I mean, Zach Moss and Chase Brown's the run game right now, which is probably a downgrade, even though Moss can do a little bit in the receiving game. Offensive line really didn't look good. I know Amarius Mims is still out, but then again, you're relying on a rookie. So just given the way the offensive line kind of looked, is what swung it for me is that the Steelers can kind of take one, get a pass rush. I mean, Joe Burrow has been historically very successful against, or TJ Watt's been historically very successful against Joe Burrow. So I would go 1-1 against the Bengals. When preseason, I was kind of leaning towards 0-2. And again, the Bengals didn't have T. Higgins either. So some things to consider. And Jamar Chase is probably limited. So if I'm a Bengals fan, I'm not panicking too much over it, but it did sway me enough that I think the Steelers can take one against them this season.
Yeah, that'll be one of the more fun, I guess, matchups of offensive line, defensive line that we'll see this year. They have a lot of big guys on that offensive line, and obviously the Steelers' defensive line. So I look forward to that matchup. The Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas. Yeah, I don't think the Steelers are getting over that hump this year, unfortunately. Patrick Mahomes looked pretty good. Yeah, he looked pretty good. Why am I blanking on the new receiver's name?
Xavier Worthy.
So, yeah, Xavier Worthy. Talk about a good debut like we talked about with Zach Frazier. He looked great, and he's going to be dangerous in that offense, and their defense looked good. So I don't think that one's going to go very well for the Steelers. I have a big Christmas depressing loss, 28-17. The Chiefs, pretty large loss there.
Yeah, it's going to be a blue Christmas for the Steelers against Patrick Mahomes. He's owned them throughout his career. I don't really see that changing just with the amount of speed on this offense. So I maybe not a blowout. The Chiefs offense hasn't looked, as explosive as maybe they did 2 years ago, ever since last season. But their defense is still really, really solid. They find a way to win games. I could see them win like 30-21, something like that.
All right, that is our predictions. I had them 10-7, and they won a game that I said they were not going to win. So I guess that means they're going to be 11-6, or maybe they'll drop one along the way. Obviously, that I predicted they would win. I don't know where yours fell, Joe. I think you were 10-7, and you also had the Falcons winning in that game. So I guess we're in the same boat in that regard. Yep. But we will move into wrap up the show here with a listener question. This one is from Brett from San Angelo, Texas. One of our top fans here, just calling in all the time. We definitely appreciate you, Brett. So here is his question.
Hello, Depot Dive. This is Brett from San Angelo, Texas. And my question for you is, based on what we saw from the blocking perspective, Jefferson in particular, but also, bless his heart, Calvin Austin, do you believe that going forward, we are likely to see more, or should we say less 11 personnel, more heavy personnel, and probably a likelihood of throwing more out of that heavy personnel? Look forward to the answer. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks for the question, Brett. And a quick plug, if you want to get your question answered, call the number at the bottom of the screen, 412-254-3145. You can also give us a text if you're a little shy and don't want your voice on the show. That is totally okay. But to answer Brett's question, which is basically, do we expect a little bit less 11 personnel, and do we expect them to be throwing a little bit more out of heavy? I think we talked about this a little bit earlier with the whole avoiding the middle of the field and stuff like this. I do think the amount of 11 personnel surprised me a little bit in week one. Obviously, when Arthur Smith was hired, the whole narrative, and Alex Kozora, researched the stats and everything. There's very few 11 personnel and a lot more kind of 12, 13, and there was 2 snaps of 14 personnel with 4 tight ends on the field and Cordell Patterson as the running back, and they had them, in a spread empty. Just very interesting looks that I look forward to seeing how they build off of those. But Joe, where do you come in on this?
Yeah, no, I think you're using the field more. I think you'll throw more out of heavy sets. I expect we'll see maybe a slight uptick in the heavy sets, like you said. We saw the 14. We saw a decent amount of heavy on Saturday, and I think we'll see, or on Sunday, I'm sorry, and we'll see more going forward and see more. Darnell Washington caught a pass on Sunday. I think that's kind of a good omen of potentially things to come if they want to utilize him more as a receiver. So wouldn't be surprised if we saw more, and could be a good thing for this offense.
Yeah, 39 of the 66 plays, there were 2 or more tight ends on the field. That's 59.1%. So, is that going to increase? That's already pretty high. So, I think that's probably a good balance, probably roughly where they'll be for the season. But Arthur Smith said a lot of stuff's matchup based. And so I think we're all pretty interested to see how they approach this next matchup against a very different looking defense. Still a very good defense, but very different in terms of what areas of the field they're good in. So I hope that answered your question, Brett, and we look forward to hearing back from you. I know we will. That wraps up our show today. Again, call the number at the bottom of the screen, 412-254-3145. If you're watching on YouTube, give us a like on this video. Subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of great content from Dave and Alex, as well as Joe and myself, coming your guys' way almost every day. And I think that's all. We will catch you guys next time.